He scraped my name off the hangar door and called it rebranding. My name was on the only FAA repair certificate keeping 40 jets in the air. Thursday, 2:15 p.m., clear October sky over the Piedmont. The kind of afternoon where you can see the ridgeline from the tarmac, the hills just starting to go copper and gold. Hangar doors wide open, two CRJ 700s in C checks on the floor, cowlings off, inspection panels hanging like open rib cages. I was in my office, glass-walled, overlooking the hangar, updating a logbook for tail number N441RG when he walked in. Chase Ridgemont, 25 years old. $400 sneakers on an epoxy floor where everyone else wears steel toes. Hair product that would be written up as a FOD hazard on any carrier deck I ever stood on. He had an HR rep behind him, a woman named Denise I'd known for 9 years. She was holding a tablet against her chest like a shield. She wouldn't look at me. Chase didn't sit down. He leaned against the doorframe like he was posing for something. "Doug, we're modernizing the maintenance division. Your position is being restructured effective immediately. We appreciate your years of service, but Ridgemont needs fresh energy going forward." Fresh energy. I'd been awake since 4:15 a.m. I set down the pen, closed the logbook, looked at him. "Does your grandfather know?" Chase smirked, the kind of smirk you can only produce when you've never been wrong about anything, because you've never been responsible for anything. "This is my operation now." I nodded. "I understand. I'll need to get my personal tools and documents from the shop." I picked up my toolbox. Olive drab, heavy gauge steel, my service number scratched into the lid with an all 20 years before that kid was applying to business school. I'd carried that box off the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2005, carried it into this hangar the same month, when the floor was bare concrete and the overhead lights didn't work yet. I walked out of the office and across the hangar floor. 30 steps. I'd counted them once, years ago, during a midnight shift when I had nothing to do but wait for an adhesive cure cycle. 30 steps from my office door to the main hangar entrance. At step 22, I stopped. 2 guys on a scissor lift, a heat gun and a flat scraper. They were peeling the lettering off the hangar door. Fenton Aerospace Services, the name I'd stenciled myself in 2005, letter by letter, after the paint dried on the frame I'd welded together with my own hands. The vinyl was coming off in long curls. The heat gun made it smell like burning rubber mixed with Skydrol hydraulic fluid and JP8 residue. That smell. If you've worked a flight line, you know it. It gets into your clothes, your truck seats, your skin. 20 years of it. Chase was standing at the base of the lift, filming it on his phone. Landscape mode. Content. I watched for 3 seconds. Then I walked to my truck. My name is Douglas Allen Fenton. I'm 52 years old. And until about 4 minutes ago, I ran the only FAA-certified Part 145 repair station that kept Ridgemont Aviation Group's 40-jet fleet in the air. I enlisted in the United States Navy at 17. My mother signed the papers. Aviation structural mechanic, AM rating. I spent 15 years fixing airframes, first on the flight deck of the Theodore Roosevelt, and then in the corrosion shop at Naval Air Station Jacksonville. F/A 18 Hornets. Composite bonding, structural repair, corrosion control. I made Chief Petty Officer, E7. I earned my FAA airframe and power plant certificates while I was still active duty through the Navy's COOL program, studying for the written exams in a rack on a carrier while the catapults banged overhead at 0-200. I separated honorably at 32, walked out of NAS Jacksonville with a toolbox, 2 certifications, and a plan. That plan started with an empty concrete pad and a rusted hangar frame outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Earl Ridgemont, the man who built Ridgemont Aviation from a single Beechcraft King Air and a grass strip in 1971, drove me out to it in his truck. Cowboy boots and a handshake. He pointed at the ruin and said, "Can you make this work?" I told him I could. I poured the epoxy floors myself, ran the electrical, designed the tool crib with the same FOD discipline I'd carried off the carrier deck. Every socket accounted for, every wrench on a shadow board. I wired the overhead fluorescent banks, built the sheet metal shop, set up the logbook shelves, hung the tail number whiteboard, and wrote every number on it in my own hand. I established Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC, as the operating entity. My attorney, Frank Caldwell, former Navy JAG, the sharpest man I've ever fished with, structured the partnership agreement with Ridgemont. Article 5, subsection 12, spelled it out. The FAA Part 145 Repair Station Certificate would be issued to and held by the LLC. My LLC, not Ridgemont. Earl signed it without blinking because he trusted me, and he needed the station certified fast. That was 2005, 20 years ago. In those 20 years, I built Ridgemont's maintenance capability from an empty slab to a 3-shift operation. 22 A and P mechanics, 40 aircraft. I signed every logbook entry, every return to service authorization, every inspection sign-off. I held the FAA inspection authorization personally. That certificate is issued to a human being, not a logo. Without my IA, no aircraft in that fleet could be legally returned to service after a scheduled inspection. I was the operation, and it cost me. Tyler, my son, played his first hockey game when he was 11. Lake Norman Ice House, 6 a.m. puck drop for the Youth League. Linda texted me a photo. Tyler on the ice, helmet too big, stick too long, grinning like he'd just been drafted. I was in the hangar at 5 a.m. that morning because a Learjet 45 needed an emergency wing spar inspection before a charter departure. I looked at that photo on my phone standing under the belly of that jet. I saved it, put it in a magnetic frame inside my toolbox lid. It's still there. I missed 6 straight seasons of that kid's games. Tyler's 17 now, junior at Lake Norman High. He drives himself to 4:45 a.m. ice, time 3 mornings a week. He stopped asking me if I'd be there around age 13. Not angry about it, just adjusted, the way kids do when they figure out that the answer is probably no. Linda, my wife, she moved 4 times for my career. Navy wife, then aviation wife. Same drill, different uniform. She never complained. Not once. Not when I missed dinners. Not when I slept at the hangar during charter season. Not when the phone rang at 2 a.m. because a hydraulic pump failed in Greenville, and I was the only one who could authorize the repair. 3 years ago, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "That company is using you up, Doug, and you're letting them." She was right. She was also tired. But I stayed, because Earl trusted me, because the mechanics trusted me, because the logbooks were clean and the fleet was safe, and the work mattered. I stayed because that's what you do when you build something. Then Chase Ridgemont showed up, 11 weeks ago. 25 years old. Harvard MBA, class of 2023, accelerated 2-year program. His prior experience, 11 months as a senior innovation strategist at Flyboard Technologies, a startup that made airline seatback entertainment apps. 14 employees. No revenue. His mother, Victoria Ridgemont Ward, Earl's daughter, spent a year lobbying the board to give the boy real responsibility. Earl finally relented, called it letting the boy get his sea legs. Chase arrived in a black Porsche Cayenne, Massachusetts plates still on it 11 weeks later. He parked in the fire lane outside the hangar every single day. That car had never been within 50 feet of jet exhaust. His first company-wide memo used the phrase, "Agile Maintenance Ecosystem." Without irony, he called the A&P mechanics shop floor associates. He carried an iPad everywhere and never opened it to anything useful. He smelled like cologne that cost more than a torque wrench, and it clashed with the skydroll in the air like two chemicals that should never be in the same room. 2 weeks before he fired me, I walked past his office. The door was open. Chase never learned that hangars carry sound like cathedrals. Hard surfaces, high ceilings, every word bouncing off steel and concrete. He was on the phone with a board member. The old mechanic thinks he's irreplaceable. Everyone's replaceable. I can post on flightjobs.com and have 10 A&P guys lined up by Friday. This isn't brain surgery, it's oil changes and tire rotations. I stood in the corridor for 6 seconds, listening, not to hear more, just to be sure I'd heard it right. Oil changes and tire rotations. I've done structural repairs on FA-18 Hornets at sea in conditions that would make that kid cry into his hair product. I've signed off on airworthiness directives that kept 23,000 passengers alive in the air at any given moment. But to Chase Ridgemont, I was a mechanic doing oil changes. I walked back to the hangar floor, said nothing. That night, after Linda went to bed, I opened the safe in my home office, took out the original partnership agreement, the one Frank Caldwell and I drafted in 2005. Found Article 5, subsection 12. Read it for the first time in 10 years. Then I put it back. And I waited. I didn't have to wait long. The drive home from the hangar took 22 minutes. Clear October afternoon, windows down on the F-25. Oh, Piedmont air coming through the cab, warm and dry. The hills along I-77 were just starting to turn. Copper at the edges, green stubborn in the middle. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone, didn't do anything except drive. 218,000 miles on that truck. I bought it used in 2011 with cash. I've hauled turbine blades in the bed. The driver's seat fabric is cracked from 15 years of sliding in and out in work pants. It runs perfect because I maintain it myself. Same principle as everything else. You take care of the machine. The machine takes care of you. I pulled into the driveway in Mooresville, sat in the truck for 5 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel, staring at the garage door. The same stillness I learned on the flight deck between launch cycles, the quiet after the catapult fires, and before the next aircraft rolls into position. You don't move. You don't think ahead. You just breathe and wait for the world to tell you what's next. I got out, walked inside. Linda was in the kitchen. She looked at me, looked at the toolbox in my hand, the one that lives at the hangar, the one that never comes home. And she knew. What happened? I set the toolbox on the counter. The magnetic frame inside the lid caught the light. Tyler at 11, blurry on the ice. I got fired. She stared at me for a long moment. Linda doesn't panic. She moved 4 times for the Navy. She raised a kid during charter seasons when I was gone more than I was home. She sat through 2 deployments and a dozen midnight phone calls. She doesn't rattle. What are you going to do? I walked to the home office, opened the safe, pulled out the partnership agreement, 20 pages, dated 2005, Frank Caldwell's letterhead on the cover sheet. Call Frank. At 6:40 p.m., I sat at my desk in the home office and dialed Frank Caldwell's cell. The room was small, a converted bedroom with a metal filing cabinet, a desk lamp Linda bought at a yard sale 12 years ago, and a window that looked out at the backyard, where Tyler's old hockey net was still set up in the grass, pucks scattered around it like they'd been there all summer. The partnership agreement was open on the desk in front of me. Article 5, subsection 12. I'd flagged it with a yellow sticky note. Frank picked up on the first ring. Ray Cooper called me an hour ago, told me the whole thing. I've been sitting here waiting for you. Frank Caldwell, 54 years old, former Navy JAG. He was the legal officer at Enas Jacksonville during my last 3 years there. We'd been fishing Lake Norman together for 18 years. He'd helped me structure Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC in 2005, drafted the partnership agreement, reviewed every line of Article 5, subsection 12, before Earl Ridgemont ever saw it. He'd been telling me for 3 years that this call was coming. I just didn't believe him until today. Doug, the Part 145 is under Fenton Aerospace Services. Your LLC always has been. Article 5, subsection 12. You file for voluntary surrender of that certificate, and 40 aircraft become unflyable. Legally, every jet in their fleet is grounded the moment the FAA processes the filing. I looked at the page. The language was clear. I'd read it 100 times in the last 2 weeks, but hearing Frank say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. How fast? I'll have the surrender paperwork filed by 8 a.m. tomorrow. The FAA's Flight Standards District Office in Charlotte. They don't sit on voluntary surrenders. It's not a dispute. It's not a hearing. The certificate holder notifies the FAA in writing that they're surrendering their certificate. That's it. By Saturday, Ridgemont Aviation doesn't have a certified repair station. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked at the sticky note on Article 5, subsection 12. If you've ever been called replaceable by someone who couldn't do your job for 5 minutes, hit that like button and subscribe. 20 years of my life in that hangar. And looked at the sticky note on Article 5, subsection 12. 20 years of my life in that hangar. 20 years of logbook entries, inspection sign-offs, 4:15 a.m. mornings with a thermos of black coffee and the hum of fluorescent banks overhead. 20 years of keeping 40 aircraft safe and legal and in the air. File it, I said. Already drafted. Just needed to hear you say it. That was Frank. He'd had the paperwork ready for 3 years. Friday morning. 8 a.m. Frank walked the voluntary surrender filing into the FAA's Flight Standards District Office on West Boulevard in Charlotte. Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC, holder of FAA Part 145 Repair Station Certificate Number Y4, NR735R, voluntarily surrenders said certificate effective immediately. I wasn't there. I was home. Standing in my kitchen at 7:45 a.m., pouring coffee into the dented thermos with the ghost of a Navy anchor on the side. Linda was getting ready for work at the dental practice. Tyler had already left for school. He'd driven himself in the Civic at 7:15, hockey bag in the back seat because he had practice after 6th period. The house was quiet. I drank my coffee and waited. Meanwhile, Chase Ridgemont was having the most productive Friday of his 11-week career. At 10 a.m., he posted a LinkedIn carousel titled Day 1, the new Ridgemont MRO experience, with a little airplane emoji. 4 photos. The first showed the freshly rebranded hangar door, Ridgemont Aviation Maintenance Center, in crisp new vinyl, the adhesive still off-gassing in the October sun. The second was a shot of the hangar interior, wide angle, the 2 CRJ 700s still in C-checks that nobody was authorized to complete. The third was Chase, standing in front of the door with his arms crossed, smiling. The fourth was a close-up of the new signage with a lens flare that looked manufactured. The caption read, Day 1 of a new chapter. Sometimes leadership means making tough calls to honor a brand's future. Proud to bring the Ridgemont maintenance operation under one unified identity. The future of MRO is digital first, agile, and built for what's next. #NextGen, #Aviation. Innovation, #Redefining MRO. He tagged Harvard Business School's alumni page. He got 847 likes by Friday evening, most of them from people who had never set foot on a hangar floor. At 2 p.m. Friday, Chase sent a company-wide email. I heard about it later from Ray Cooper, who forwarded it to me without comment. Team, today marks a new chapter. We've consolidated our maintenance brand under the Ridgemont name where it belongs. Fresh energy, modern systems, digital-first approach. The old way of doing things is behind us. I'm excited to lead this transformation, and I know you are too. More updates coming Monday. Chase Ridgemont, COO and Director of MRO Operations. COO and Director of MRO Operations. He'd given himself my title on top of his own. He ordered new business cards that afternoon. He had the glass walls of my former office tinted and new furniture delivered. A standing desk, an ergonomic chair, a mounted monitor he'd never connect to the maintenance tracking system because he didn't know the login. At some point Friday afternoon, he walked into Pamela Sheffield's office. Pamela was the VP of Regulatory Compliance. Sharp, competent, hired by Earl 7 years ago. She understood FAA regulations the way I understood airframe structures. She was good at her job, and she knew exactly how fragile the regulatory framework was underneath the business. Chase told her to handle the FAA paperwork transition. Pamela looked at him. What transition? The name change. On the certificate. Just update it. Update what, specifically? Chase waved his hand. The maintenance certificate. It says Fenton on it. Change it to Ridgemont. File whatever form you need to file. Pamela's stomach dropped. I know this because she told me herself, weeks later. She said she felt the floor tilt. Not because she knew yet, not the full picture, but because the way he said it told her everything about what he didn't know. You don't update a Part 145 certificate. You don't change the name on it like editing a business card. The certificate is issued to a legal entity after months of inspections, capability reviews, and personnel qualifications. It's not a document you rebrand. She started pulling files. The original partnership agreement was archived in Ridgemont's legal database, a system she had access to but hadn't needed in years. She found it Friday evening. She read Article 5, subsection 12 for the first time. Then she read it again. Then she closed her laptop and sat in her office for 10 minutes with the lights off. She didn't call anyone that night. She was still hoping she was wrong. She wasn't. Saturday morning. 10:22 a.m. Pamela Sheffield was sitting at her kitchen table in her pajamas, coffee getting cold, when her phone buzzed with an FAA email notification. The filing was there. Fenton Aerospace Services, SL.LC, holder of FAA Part 145 Repair Station Certificate Number Y4, NR735R, has voluntarily surrendered said certificate effective immediately. She read it again, then opened her laptop and pulled up the partnership agreement she'd found the night before. Article 5, subsection 12 was on page 14. The Part 145 Repair Station Certificate, issued to Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC, shall remain the property of said LLC. In the event of termination of the consulting relationship, the certificate holder retains full authority to surrender, transfer, or reassign said certificate without obligation to Ridgemont Aviation Group. Her hands were shaking. She told me that later, too. Said her fingers were trembling so badly, she misdialed Chase's number the first time. She called Chase. No answer. He was at brunch in uptown Charlotte. She knew this because he'd posted an Instagram story 12 minutes earlier. A mimosa on a white tablecloth with the caption, CEO Energy, and a sun emoji. She called again. Nothing. A third time. Voicemail. She called Earl Ridgemont's landline in Blowing Rock. The old man picked up on the second ring. Mr. Ridgemont, the Part 145 certificate. It was never ours. It was never Ridgemont's. It belonged to Douglas Fenton's LLC, and he just surrendered it to the FAA. Silence on the line, the kind of silence that has weight. I've heard it on carrier decks when someone reports a crack in a structural member that shouldn't have one. Then Earl, quiet. Say that again. She said it again. Every word. By noon Saturday, the FAA issued an advisory. All Ridgemont Aviation Group aircraft were prohibited from flight operations until a certified Part 145 repair station of record was established and approved. 40 jets sat on tarmacs across 14 cities. Gate agents stared at screens they couldn't fix. Pilots called operations and got hold music. 23,000 passengers were stranded. Business travelers, families, charter clients who paid premium rates for guaranteed departures. The phones at Ridgemont's operations center didn't stop ringing for 72 hours. Chase finally returned Pamela's call at 1:15 p.m. Saturday. He was in his car. She could hear the Porsche's engine in the background. She told him. All of it. His response, so just get another certificate. Pamela closed her eyes. I imagined she gripped the phone hard enough to leave marks. Chase, a Part 145 application takes 6 to 18 months minimum. You need qualified personnel, facility inspections, capability list reviews, an FAA-approved quality control manual. Then hire someone. You can't hire a Part 145 certificate, and you just fired the only IA holder on our payroll. Silence. Then, what does that mean? It means no one at Ridgemont Aviation is legally authorized to inspect, maintain, or return to service a single aircraft. Not one. Not until we either get Douglas back or start the certification process from zero. More silence. I'll call my grandfather. I already did. On the aviation wire services, the story hit Saturday afternoon. Regional carrier Ridgemont Aviation Group, fleet of 40 aircraft, grounded by FAA pending repair station certification. The stock started sliding in after-hours trading before the sun went down. Chase's LinkedIn post was still live, still collecting likes. The hangar door still read Ridgemont Aviation Maintenance Center in fresh vinyl, and behind it, 2 CRJ 700s sat in incomplete C-checks that no living employee of Ridgemont Aviation Group was certified to finish. I was home. Saturday evening, Linda and I ate dinner at the kitchen table. Leftover chicken, green beans from the garden, iced tea. Tyler was at a friend's house. The house was quiet. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. I'd turned it face down on the counter after the fourth call from a number I didn't recognize. Linda looked at the phone, looked at me. How many? I checked. 14 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 2 text messages from numbers I'd never seen. It's starting, I said. She nodded, took a sip of tea. Good. Sunday morning, my phone rang at 7:15 a.m. I was on the back deck, coffee in the thermos, watching fog burn off Lake Norman through the trees at the edge of the property. The call was from a number I did recognize. Greg Mitchell, CEO of Skyline Regional Airways, Ridgemont's largest competitor. I'd known Greg for 12 years. We'd sat on the same FAA advisory panel in 2016. We'd talked shop at industry conferences. He'd offered me a job 3 separate times. I'd turned him down each time out of loyalty to Earl. Greg didn't waste words. Doug, I saw the grounding notice. I know what you're holding. I want to talk about a partnership before anyone else does. I took a sip of coffee. The thermos was warm in my hands. The fog was thinning over the lake. And somewhere down the hill, a neighbor's dog was barking at nothing. I'm listening, I said. Monday morning, I drove to Skyline Regional Airways headquarters on the east side of Charlotte Douglas International. The building was nothing fancy. 2 stories of beige concrete and tinted glass, built in the 90s, functional. The parking lot smelled like jet fuel and warm pavement. I'd been in this building twice before for industry panels. This time, I walked in through the executive entrance, and Greg Mitchell met me in the lobby himself. Greg was 58. He wore a button-down with the sleeves rolled to the elbows and boots that had actually touched a tarmac. We shook hands, and he led me to a conference room on the 2nd floor. The room had a window that faced west, across the field. Through the glass, I could see 3 Ridgemont jets parked on a remote taxiway, covers over the engines, orange cones around the landing gear, going nowhere. The tail numbers were visible. I'd signed the logbooks on all 3. Greg set a folder on the table. Here's what I'm offering. Exclusive MRO partnership with Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC. Your Part 145 certificate, your facility, your personnel. $56 million over 4 years. Full authority over maintenance operations, scheduling, and return to service protocols. VP of Fleet Maintenance title. Your LLC retains the certificate. Skyline provides the fleet. I opened the folder, read every line. Frank Caldwell had already reviewed a draft over the phone Sunday night. The terms were clean. One addition, I said. Greg leaned back. Name it. 5-year exclusivity provision. No Ridgemont Aviation aircraft serviced at my facility for the duration. Greg looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked out the window at the 3 grounded jets on the taxiway. Done. I signed the partnership agreement on day 10, a Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. The pen was mine, a plain ballpoint I'd carried in my shirt pocket for years, the same one I used to sign logbook entries. Nothing ceremonial about it. I signed my name the way I always sign my name. Douglas A. Fenton. The same signature on every return-to-service authorization I'd ever issued. Greg shook my hand across the table. Welcome to Skyline, Doug. I looked out the window. The Ridgemont jets were still there. Engine covers on. Cones up. A tug had been disconnected from one of them and left sitting on the taxiway, like someone had started to move the aircraft, and then realized there was nowhere legal to take it. Appreciate the view, I said. That same week, I started making phone calls. Not to Ridgemont, to the clients I'd been briefing on maintenance protocols for a decade. Corporate charter accounts, executives who flew twice a week on Ridgemont jets and trusted that those aircraft were safe because I told them they were. Because I showed them the logbooks. Because I knew their names, knew their routes, knew which account managers to call when weather rerouted a charter at the last minute. 3 contracts. Ridgemont's most profitable corporate charter accounts. I called each one personally. The conversations were short. This is Doug Fenton. I'm now with Skyline Regional Airways. I can have a charter solution in place for you by end of day. All 3 transferred within 2 weeks. They didn't ask about Ridgemont's timeline. They didn't shop around. They followed the man who'd kept them safe in the air for 10 years. Ray Cooper resigned from Ridgemont the same week I signed with Skyline. He walked into Pamela Sheffield's office, set his badge on her desk, and said, "I go where the chief goes." 5 other A&P mechanics followed within the month, all accepting positions at Fenton Aerospace Services, LLC, under the Skyline partnership. Every one of them was someone I'd hired, trained, or vouched for. They came because they knew the work would be done right, and because nobody wants to work at a grounded airline with no repair station and a 25-year-old COO who thinks maintenance is oil changes. Ridgemont couldn't replace them. The aviation mechanic labor market in Charlotte was tight before the grounding. After it, with the FAA investigation hanging over Ridgemont's name, like smoke, qualified A&P mechanics wouldn't return the recruiter's calls. 2 weeks after the grounding, the FAA convened a conference call with Ridgemont's senior leadership to discuss recertification. Earl Ridgemont dialed in from his study in Blowing Rock. I imagine him sitting in the leather chair under the framed photo of his first Beechcraft King Air. Cowboy boots on the ottoman, cigar gone cold in the ashtray. Chase dialed in from the boardroom at headquarters. Pamela Sheffield was on the line. 3 FAA officials from the regional office. The FAA regional administrator explained the timeline. Minimum 8 months to process a new Part 145 application. Assuming Ridgemont could hire qualified inspectors. Assuming the facility passed a full audit. Assuming they could assemble an approved capability list and quality control manual from scratch. Chase interrupted. "Can't we expedite this?" The FAA administrator's response was flat and final. "The regulations don't have an expedite button, Mr. Ridgemont." Silence on the line, the kind that fills a room even when the room is a phone call. Then Earl Ridgemont unmuted. His voice was quiet, the voice of a man who built a company from a grass strip and a single airplane, who shook my hand in 2005 and said, "Can you make this work?" Who let his daughter talk him into putting a boy in a man's chair. "Chase, you're relieved of your duties. Effective now. Pamela, please note the time." Chase's voice cracked. "Grandpa, you can't—" "I let family cloud my business judgment. I won't make that mistake again." Pamela noted the time. The FAA officials said nothing. There was nothing to say. Earl called me that evening. I was in the garage, organizing the toolbox I'd brought home from Ridgemont, putting everything back in its place, sockets on the rail, wrenches in order, FOD check out of habit. Linda was inside making dinner. I could hear Tyler's music through his bedroom window upstairs. Earl's voice sounded 10 years older than the last time I'd heard it. "Douglas, I don't know what to say to you." "You don't need to say anything, Mr. Ridgemont." I should have listened. 3 years ago. 5 years ago. I knew what that boy was. I set a half-inch ratchet on the shadow board, lined it up with the outline. I didn't ground your fleet, Mr. Ridgemont. Your grandson did. I just stopped loaning you my name. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I know. That was the last conversation Earl Ridgemont and I ever had. The aftermath was mathematical. $890 million in annual route revenue hemorrhaged over 6 months as routes were suspended, rebid, and awarded to competitors. Primarily Skyline. Ridgemont's stock dropped 67% in 4 weeks. The board initiated emergency proceedings, 3 lawsuits from stranded passengers seeking damages, an FAA investigation into Chase's failure to verify certificate ownership before restructuring the maintenance division. The LinkedIn post stayed live for 3 days after the grounding. 3 days of likes and congratulatory comments rolling in under a carousel about rebranding, while 40 jets sat covered on tarmacs from Charlotte to Chicago. Someone on Ridgemont's legal team finally made him take it down. 8 months after Chase Ridgemont scraped my name off the hangar door, Ridgemont Aviation Group was sold to Skyline Regional Airways at an 80% discount. Skyline absorbed the routes, the gates, the remaining aircraft. The Ridgemont name disappeared from the tail fins. The brand that Earl built from a grass strip in 1971 was folded into another man's company for pennies. And the hangar, the one I'd built from a rusted frame and a concrete pad, the one Chase rebranded with fresh vinyl and a LinkedIn photo, was brought back under the Fenton Aerospace Services LLC certificate within 30 days of the acquisition. I re-signed the door myself. Same font, same spot, Fenton Aerospace Services. Ray Cooper held the ladder while I pressed the letters into place. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We didn't need to. Douglas Fenton, VP of Fleet Maintenance, Skyline Regional Airways, Fenton Aerospace Services LLC services 85 aircraft now. Skyline's original fleet plus the Ridgemont jets I grounded 8 months earlier. The same jets. The same logbooks. Some of the same tail numbers I'd written on the whiteboard in my own hand 20 years ago. My LLC collected $71 million in combined facility income and partnership fees. Chase Ridgemont's LinkedIn went quiet. Last activity, the carousel post he was forced to delete. His Harvard MBA alumni profile still listed him as COO of Ridgemont Aviation Group for 2 months after the sale. The company no longer existed. Last I heard, he was back in Massachusetts. I don't know what he's doing. I don't think about it. That evening, a Tuesday in October, almost exactly a year to the day, I drove home. Indian summer. Windows down on the F-25. Oh, warm air through the cab. The Piedmont hills holding their color in the late gold light. Pine sap and warm asphalt. The kind of evening where the sun takes its time going down, like it's not in any rush either. I pulled into the driveway, and Tyler was there. Waxing his Civic, the used one I'd helped him buy with money from his job at the rink. He'd laid old towels on the concrete to catch the drips. The hood was already done, gleaming wet in the low sun. He looked up, rag in hand. "Mom said you had a big day." I nodded. "Decent." He grinned. "You going to my game Saturday?" I leaned against the truck, crossed my arms. "Front row." He tossed me a rag. "Help me with the hood." So I did. We worked in the driveway until the sun went down. No phone, no radio, just the sound of a rag on sheet metal and a 17-year-old talking about hockey. His line changes, his coach's new breakout play, the weird rattle in the Civic's passenger door that he wanted to figure out this weekend. I told him we'd pull the panel off Saturday morning before his game. He said cool. Linda watched from the kitchen window for a while. I caught her eye once. She didn't wave. She just stood there with her hands on the counter, watching her husband and her son in the driveway in the last light, and she smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't need anything said back. I stayed out there until the streetlights came on. Tyler went inside to shower. I stood in the driveway alone for a minute. The thermos was on the workbench in the garage. Same dented lid, same ghost of a Navy anchor. I'd fill it again at 4:15 tomorrow morning. Drive to the hangar. Walk through the door with my name on it. But not yet. Right now, the air was warm, and the trees smelled like pine, and my kid's car was clean, and there was nowhere else I needed to be. First time in 20 years, I could say that. Funny thing about aviation, doesn't matter how shiny the plane is, how new the paint job looks, or whose name is on the tail. If the man who signed the logbook walks away, that aircraft doesn't leave the ground. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.